Hi guys! It's time for another What Sold. This one's going to be for the week of October 22nd through 28th. If you're new here, my name is Wendy and this is Nina's Jewels. My husband and I buy things at places like garage sales, flea markets, anywhere we can find things to sell online and flip for a profit. If that's content you're interested in, you're in the right place. If you want to support our channel, make sure to hit that like button. And if you enjoy this content and find it helpful or informative, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. All right, let's dive in to what sold. The first thing that sold was a vintage lot of 14 bowling themed, they were called Bowler's Crying Towels, and they were by the brand Dundee. We got these at a garage sale. She had purchased them, she said, to give as gifts in some bowling themed party, and then I guess that party didn't end up happening, so we were able to get all of them for a really good price. We paid $10 for all of them, and they sold for $50 even on best offer. It did take a while to sell, but we were happy to wait. It was a good return on our investment. Next up was a new in package pair of green fishnet tights or hose, pantyhose. They were by the brand Music Legs. I'd picked these up at a garage sale for $1 and they sold right before Halloween, of course, for $7 plus shipping, and that was on Poshmark. Next up was a lot of 10 plastic brown utility telephone poles for use in model trains. And we had gotten these at a garage sale for 25 cents. We got all of them together. They looked like they were not ever used, but maybe something had been stored on top of them, and some of them kind of had some slight bend to them. So we did disclose that. We sold them for $10.99. That was our full asking price. Next up was a vintage Doris brand embroidery floss organizer with bobbins. It was brand new and sealed with the shrink wrap still on it. We found this in the Goodwill bins. We paid $1.03 for each of the items that day, and this sold for $15.98 on offer to buyer. Next up was a Tommy Bahama men's extra large silk button-up shirt, and on the back it said something like it's Merlot time or something like that. It had like a really, I would call it loud, but I don't want to offend anybody with that, but it had a very distinct visible print on the back. And that's the thing to look for with Tommy Bahama shirts. If you see one that has kind of a muted print that's not very noticeable, like not a very noticeable shirt, I would not pick that up. But if you see a Tommy Bahama shirt that has something that is just kind of a crazy print and something that would really draw the eye, those are the ones to look for in Tommy Bahama, and those sell really fast, and this one sold super fast. You may have seen us pick up this item when we went to the church rummage sale recently. We found a lot of men's button-up shirts. Most of them were Harley, but we did find this one, and this was the very first shirt from that sale to sell. In fact, it was one of the first items at all from that sale to sell. So we had paid $3.25 for that at that rummage sale, and it sold for $23.50 on best offer. Next up was a Wii Sports Resort Nintendo Wii game. It was complete with the manual, and we tested it and it worked. Actually, the thing that's crazy about this is we got this game, it was actually inside, we got this from that church rummage sale also, and it was actually inside a case for another game. So we opened up the case, I think it was like Wheel of Fortune or something, and my husband was like, oh, Wii Sports Resort is inside, because that's a much better game than Wheel of Fortune. And the absolutely crazy thing about that is we had the case for this game without the game that we had picked up in the Goodwill bins. So we had found the Wii Sports Resort case, no game, in the bins, and I was like, oh, we have the case for that. So we were able to combine the two and get more for it. So we had paid $3.25 for this at the rummage sale, and it sold for $26 even on best offer. Next up were two Noritake Silver Palace coffee mugs. They were brand new. These were gifted to me to sell by a family member, so we had no cost, and these sold for $45 even. Next up was a Legs brown sugar pair of ultra sheer pantyhose in the color jet black. Some vintage pantyhose can do really, really well. These didn't sell for as much, but they still sold. We got them at a garage sale for $2 and they sold for $13.99, and that was our asking price. Next up was a 2010 pillow pet. This one was a large stuffed dog. We got this at the thrift store for $2.16 and it sold for $20 even on best offer. Be on the lookout for pillow pets. They sell really, really well. Next up was a vintage 1983 Star Wars Return of the Jedi. I described it as a picture record because it had pictures on the actual record. I found this at an estate sale for 50 cents. You'll see that it says flaws in the title. That's because this was an extremely scratched record. It didn't have the record sleeve with it and had been stored at a house that way and had gotten a lot of damage. So I sold it, and in the description I put something like, would make for great decor or, just to look at. It did still play, but it sounded very, very scratchy. So we included that information in the listing and it still sold. We had paid only 50 cents for this and it sold for $15.98 on offer to buyer. Next up was a Revere copper bottom stainless steel 4-quart saucepan. We did not have the lid. We got this gifted to us to sell from a family member and it sold for $20 even on best offer. Next up was a Scentsy Houston Astros ceramic wax oil warmer. Some of these Scentsy oil warmers can sell for a lot, so if you see them and can get them for the right price, especially if they have the box, they can sell for a lot. This one we didn't have the box on, but it still sold for a lot. Of course, the Astros. We got this at an estate sale for $10 even and sold it for our full asking price of $59.99. Next up was a 1998 lot of 2 Blue's Clues coloring and activity books. One of them was brand new and another one had 1 page colored in. We got this at the thrift store for $1.19 and sold these for our full asking price of $14.99. Next up was a 1995 reprint of the American Dictionary of the English Language by Noah Webster from 1828. We got this also at the thrift store and had paid $5.40 for it. It sold really quickly for $56.24. Next up was a Seventh-day Adventist Bible Dictionary, complete with the Atlas, from 1960. We got this at the thrift store for $3.24, and it sold for our full asking price of $32.99. Next up was a 2015 Sharper Image replacement parts only for an outdoor slingshot. We had the actual slingshot and 3 barrels, but not whatever ammunition you would put in the slingshot. This was inside of a thrift store toy bag. As I've stated before, when we get a thrift store toy bag, unless it's just utter garbage, we list it because it still blows my mind, the stuff that sells, including this. I'm surprised this sold. We had paid just 19 cents for this, and it sold for our full asking price of $13.99. Next up was a Tim Buck 3 vintage cassette from 1986 called Greetings from Tim Buck 3. We got this at the thrift store for 27 cents, and it sold for our full asking price of $9.99. Next up was a Funko Pop. This one was Loki from the movie Thor. And Loki is very popular right now. There's a Loki show on Disney Plus, I think. And so I think that's probably what helped this item to sell. It was not worth a lot. It was new in the package. And it sold for $19.99. This was gifted to us to sell from a family member. Next up was another item that was gifted to us to sell. So we had no cost on this. This was an Invisible Shield Extreme Impact Screen Protector for an Apple iPad Pro. This was in one of our unboxing videos and I wasn't sure what it was, but actually it was just the entire contents of the box of the item, but it had been torn open and it looked like it had been used, but it actually had never been used. So we just sold it as open box basically. And we had no cost and it sold for $10.38 and it sold fast, so that was worth listing. Next up was a lot of 2 Halloween cassettes. One was called Ghost Witches and Folk Tales of Scotland, and then the other one was just horror sounds. We got these both at the thrift store. We paid 54 cents for them and they sold for a best offer of $12 even. Next up was a vintage 1989 Budweiser Budman metal sign. It was large. It was 29 by 19. We were gifted this to sell by a family member, and this sold fast, and it sold for $129.99. That was our full asking price. That was a good one. Next up was one of those VHS-C to VHS adapter or converters so that you can play the VHS-C cassettes that you use in a handy cam kind of thing, and you can play them in your VCR. If you ever find one of these, worth picking up. They always sell super duper fast. We had found this at a garage sale in a dollar bin of movies, and it sold for $32.99. That was our full asking price. Next up was a paperback book. It was a textbook, a college textbook called Marketing 13. We got this at a garage sale for $1, and it sold very fast for $32.99. Next up was two Yaya Sisterhood paperback books that we allotted together. We got these at a garage sale for $1, and they sold for our full asking price of $9.99. Next up was a Athleta t-shirt. It had a keyhole open back, and it was in the color blush. We got this at a garage sale for $1, and it sold for $20 even on best offer. Next up was a Sao Paulo women's black and white zebra wool knit wrap. It had faux fur on it. Or it might have been real fur. I said that it was fur trim, so it must have been real fur. This was actually gifted to us to sell by a family member, so we had no cost, and it sold for $40 even on best offer. Next up was a lot of 7 instructional guitar VHS videos. They were from multiple different people. We bought them all at the thrift store at the same time, knowing that we would lot them together. And we had a lot of interest on these, but everybody wanted to pay barely enough to even cover the shipping. So finally, when we got a reasonable offer, I accepted it, but it did take a while to sell. We had paid in total $1.68 for all of them, and they sold for $24 even, and that was on best offer. Next up was a BCBG Max Azria bandage skirt. We had 2 of these in our store that were gifted to us to sell by a family member, and they both sold, and I would definitely pick this item up again. This one was not in as good of condition as the other one, so it sold for less, but it sold for $29.99, our full asking price, and we had no cost with it. Next up was an American Airlines Colhan branded first class amenity dot kit kind of bag. We found this in the thrift store for $2.16, and it sold for $13 even on best offer. We did have to lower the price just a touch because at our thrift store they staple on the price tags, which to me is really annoying because a lot of stuff gets damaged that way, and this did get a little hole in it where they had stapled through the actual faux leather, and that was annoying, so I did have to disclose that, and we took a little bit less for it. Next up was a set of 2 Pottery Barn Euro pillow shams. We find these a lot for some reason at the thrift store that we go to, and they always sell really well. These sold for $63.98 on offer to buyer, and we had paid $3.24 for those at the thrift store. Next up was an antique enamel granite ware cup, and it had a boy and a sheep, and it said made in Czechoslovakia on the bottom. We got this at an estate sale for $5.41, and it sold really fast for $19.99. That was our full asking price. Next up was a Texas Rangers baseball glove that was signed by a large number of players from the 1975 team. We got this at an estate sale. We paid $40 for it. I tried to comp it at the sale, but something like that is just so hard to comp. I wasn't really sure. I thought maybe it would not be worth it, and it pretty much wasn't. But we still made profit on it. I just don't know that it was, really worth it. I probably wouldn't pick it up again. It did sell for $59.99, and it did sell pretty fast, so maybe we could have gotten a little bit more for it, but it didn't sell so fast that I felt like I had underpriced it significantly. But we still made a little bit of a profit, so that's really all that matters. Next up was a vintage 1987 Maniac Mansion game box only. It was an empty box. It did not have the game inside of it. And this was from my own personal Apple II computer when I was a little kid. And my mom gave me a box of like the old Apple game boxes, and some of them had discs. Most of them were just empty boxes, like the manual for the computer and a bunch of stuff like that. And that stuff has been selling really, really well. But this Maniac Mansion game, I remember it was like one of my favorites. I loved this game. Unfortunately, we did not have the actual game anymore, but y'all are not going to believe this. The box only sold for $99.99. So, I mean, I think most people would pick it up anyway, but definitely if you ever see vintage Apple game boxes, even if there's no game inside of it, or the games too, anything like that, that is definitely worth picking up. This is one of my old ones as well. This was a 1987 Kid Mickey Radical Ninja Apple II game box, sleeve and manual only. It did not have the actual game in it. This one sold for an offer to buyer of $33.98. Hi, Wendy from the edit again. I forgot something again. This happened last week too. I'm obviously not paying close enough attention when I'm recording, but I'm going to add this in real quick. This was a lot of 6 Little People, Fisher-Price zoo animals. It had all different kinds of zoo animals, and it sold for $12.50. We got it at that church rummage sale on the first day, and we paid just $1 for all of them. And last, I'm going to go over all of the collectible cards that sold from my husband's personal collection. We sold 2 high value cards this week, which were both sold as auctions. The first one was a Soul Ring card. This one sold for $50.98, and that was on auction. Next up was a Magic the Gathering Natural Selection card. This one sold for $76 even on auction. And last, we sold 3 low value cards, meaning cards valued at $10 or under, for a total price of $9.32. That wraps up all of our sales for this week. Let's go over the totals now. This week we sold 39 items for an average sale price of $31.76. Our sales totaled $1,238.68, much better than our last what sold. Sales are definitely trending up in Q4. And that made for a net profit of $731.59. So that wraps up the video for the week of October 22nd through 28th. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please let us know by hitting the like button. And if you're not already subscribed, consider hitting that subscribe button. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll catch you on the flip side.